this is a hard thing to talk about, but something I wasn't prepared for was new babies being delivered. You're in the NICU long enough that you learn that a new baby just came in. A couple days later, that baby's not there anymore. Could that be my kid? Are we gonna get a call like that?
All right. Thank you for joining the show, No Longer Nomads. I've got an awesome guest today. I'm super pumped to bring on. Nick is a good friend of mine. We've worked on many projects together over the years, and that YouTube plaque behind there might be one of them. So, Nick, thanks so much for joining on the show, No Longer Nomads, and I look forward to our conversation. If the audience would like to get to know you, what would you say about yourself and who you are?
Hey, yeah, absolutely. I'm Nick. I am a massive Texas Rangers fan. So 2023, that was a nice year to be a Rangers fan. But yeah, into baseball, I have a lovely wife named Megan, and our new little boy named Theodore. And we're just kind of out here living life and doing our thing and adjusting to life as new parents.
That's awesome. Well, man, I'm so pumped to have you on the show. And one of the reasons why I think this is going to be such a good episode is because you had a very unique experience with your son being born. And this podcast going after men that have, children and young, maybe some that are on the way. So let's get into it. I would love to hear you're on
Yeah.
a baby moon, and I'd love to hear kind of what happened on your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I decided to, we had a great plan. We were going to get away for the Babymoon for a couple days. So we live in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and we decided we were going to get away to Chattanooga. We'd never gone up there to experience, the city up there. So we were going up there to check it out, and we had been up there less than 24 hours. And my wife started having a ton of stomach pain. And she was throwing up. I mean, it was constant. And then once she couldn't throw up anymore, it was dry heaving. And that just kept going on. Her pain kept getting worse. And so this was in November. So just towards the end of November, we were going to go to a Christmas lights thing, and we were on our way to that. And she, being who she is, she's always like, I'm gonna tough this out. It's fine.
Yeah.
Basically, she was struggling the whole drive. We pull into the parking lot of this place, and she was just in so much pain. She had to get out of the car to manage this pain. And I was like, do you need to go to the hospital? And she said, she was like, no. Again, if you know Megan, she she was like, no, I don't want to ruin our trip. And I was like, that's the least of my concerns. Let's go to the hospital. So So anyway, we went to the hospital, not sure what's going on, because at this point she was 28 weeks pregnant. And so we had concerns about, the baby. Is there anything going on there? Was she going into labor? This is our first kid, so we didn't she didn't know what labor felt like. I didn't know what to expect, anything like that.
You didn't know what labor felt like either.
I did not know what labor felt like. No, still don't.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So we got to this first hospital. We just went to the closest place, and they knew she was pregnant, so that's kind of what they were checking on. Just kind of seeing if she was going into labor, if there's anything wrong with the baby. But they were like, we don't do deliveries here, so we're going to have to transfer you. So they transferred us up to a hospital in Chattanooga. We were kind of outside, the, I don't know, exurbs, I guess, of Chattanooga, the bustling metropolis of Chattanooga. Yeah, so we got transferred up there, and then they started doing some more in-depth scans. They ruled out that she was going into labor. So we were like, okay, what's going on here? And yeah, they were doing scans and found that she had like a hernia in her diaphragm, which she had a surgery before to repair that. They found that it had come back, and uh, basically what that means is that her intestines, her stomach, and I'm very sorry if there's anyone listening who's
Eating.
squeamish. I'm also very squeamish, and so this was an experience for me. But her intestines and her stomach got like pushed up in like through her diaphragm into her chest cavity, and we're putting pressure on her heart and her lungs. So anyway, when they found that out, they were like, "We're going to need to do surgery." At this point, we didn't know whether our baby would be coming soon. If they're going to be able to do the surgery and keep him inside. But when we found out she was going to need surgery, we were like, "Can we get transferred back down closer to home?" And so they transferred us back to Atlanta, where the ending part is where it got most scary. So she was in the hospital. They determined that they were going to need to deliver our baby. His name's Theodore August. And they determined they were going to need to deliver him to do the surgery on Megan. But we were just kind of waiting at that point. It was Thanksgiving Day. And then Megan ended up, because of this hernia, she ended up going septic. And so I woke up in the middle of the night on Thanksgiving, and she was essentially like I don't want to get too dramatic, but this is what happened is like she was dying. Like I woke up and she was dying, and she was unresponsive to things. Her body temperature had dropped to like it was they didn't have the instruments to measure what exactly her body temperature was. It was
Sheesh.
we know it was below 93.
Gosh.
And anyway, she had to be rushed off to surgery, where they ended up delivering Theodore and then also doing the surgery to repair everything in her gut. But we went from having our Babymoon, trying to get away before the baby comes, to uh, honestly sitting at the hospital unsure if my wife was going to live and if my baby was going to live.
I remember seeing it just spiral into, well, now she's septic. Did they
Yeah.
realize? Did they know how bad it was? Because I mean, if you go septic, it's like sometimes it can be like 30 minutes and you're gone.
Yeah, they didn't. Part of the delay, like we were sitting there waiting on potentially his delivery. Like they had determined, okay, they're going to deliver him. The part about doing the surgery on her, some of the doctors were saying, I think it was because it was Thanksgiving. Well, they told us it was because it was Thanksgiving. They were like, we're gonna wait to do her surgery until Friday or Saturday, when we have more people in. And then when she went septic in the middle of the night, that's when it turned into, oh, we have to rush her to the OR. So they, at first, yeah, they didn't know quite how bad it was from the scans. They could just see that she had this hernia and that all this stuff had got pushed up into her chest cavity, but they didn't know the extent of how
Yeah.
bad it had gotten until she started showing those symptoms,
Sheesh.
and it turned into like emergency surgery.
Gosh. So did the doctors say how close she was to death or anything? Like, did they? the reason I asked that is because when my sister almost went septic a few years ago, they said if then they were sending her home too. They couldn't figure out what's going on. They were sending her home. It was actually like a kidney stone blockage or something like that. But
Mm,
anyways, they send her home. Um, and there was one nurse that said that caught the symptoms and heard what was going on. She said, no, no,
mhm.
no, she needs to go to the OR right now, and found out that she was going septic. So um, they do believe, hey, if you went home, tried to go to bed, you would not wake up.
Yeah.
So did you hear anything, any feedback from the doctors, how bad it got?
Um, they didn't give us a, if we would have waited another amount of or a certain amount of time, like she wouldn't have made it. But I mean, it certainly would have been within a couple of hours, for sure. Like she had deteriorated quite rapidly. I remember in the middle of the night when she started, like, I mean, she couldn't think straight. I was trying to talk to her, and it's sort of amusing now. I like tease her about it, but like she was really cold because her body temperature had dropped, and I had like gone over and asked her, "Hey, do you need another blanket?" And she was like, she just kind of like stared blankly at me, and then I like asked her again, and then she was like, What what did you say about Bob Dylan?" And I was
Right.
like, no blanket. I'm gonna go get a doctor."
I don't think this is good.
Yeah,
This
so
is not good.
like, I was definitely not talking about Bob Dylan right now. Though I am a
So,
Bob Dylan fan.
yes.
But yeah, I like rushed out there and let them know what was going on. Doctors came in and they were like checking to make sure she wasn't having a stroke. Like that's what they were checking on at first. And then I think after they were like, "Oh, not having a stroke," they were like, "This is for sure sepsis and it's deteriorating rapidly. We need to get her to the OR." So, yeah.
That's crazy. So, what was going through your head when you were waiting and you could have lost your wife and your son on the same day? I mean, what was going through your head? And you said you had hours to sit and think through
Yeah.
that. Were you alone? What was going on in your head?
I I was
Thinking of the
oh
times together and all. Like, were you like that? Honestly, like, kind of a don't mean to be super dramatic, but were you thinking of your times together? Were you thinking the worst, or what was going on?
um when I was when I was watching her, um honestly the hardest part was watching her deteriorate, um watching her not be able to respond to things. Like I couldn't have conversation, like any sort of conversation with her. Like she couldn't process stuff in the moment, and that was scary. And I think the time I felt most alone, was was when I was watching her in the hospital room. Like I think you might think that it would be when I'm like sitting in the waiting area. I did have some family and stuff come up, which was helpful then. But yeah, you might think it would be like when she's in the OR and she's not with me, but like having her physically present, but like
Not there.
not there, was one of the loneliest feelings I think I've experienced.
Yeah.
And so that was probably the hardest part. And then sitting in the waiting area, all those things were obviously hard. Um, and there's a lot going through my head then as well. And I think it's funny. I think when I was sitting in the waiting area, the thing that was making me most sad was, that that we had I wanted to get away, and like it wasn't a personal thing. Like I wanted Megan to have a really special trip, before the baby came, and then it kind of turning into that, and like her in the OR. Again, it was not a personal thing, or I was, feeling like personal loss. It was like I felt sad for her
Hmm.
when I was sitting in the waiting room. Yeah.
Man. So your son, I mean, I'd love to, we talked about your wife a little bit, so they deliver your son at 28 weeks. He's
hmm
healthy. When do you get to see him? What's the first encounter like? I think this is interesting because our audience, a lot of them have kids, and that first
hmm
moments with your son is like, or daughter, is such a big, like a moment you will never forget, right? What was
hmm
yours like? Because it's not the typical one that some fathers have gone through.
Yeah. So I went up to the NICU and asked if Theodore Berg was ready to be seen, and they checked for me and said yep. And so they walked me back there, and he was in his big incubator, being born at 28 weeks. And it was a mix of feelings. It was a mix of being of joy. Like, this is my son. And this being my first kid, that feeling of, this is my son. Wow, that's incredible. I'm finally getting to see him and meet him.
Yeah.
And also seeing him intubated and in this big isolette with wires and stuff attached to him. Uh, yeah, it was definitely a mix of sorry, feeling sorry. I don't know if feeling sorry for him is the right phrase, but definitely, I think mourning the I think more appropriately for me was like mourning the brokenness of the moment, that I was there without my wife, meeting my son for the first time, seeing him in this, he was stable but still intubated, and needing all of this life support to keep him alive, but also so much joy, being able to finally meet him, because
Yeah.
we'd been waiting for a long time, and I'd seen him on the ultrasounds, and yeah, definitely a mix of those
Yeah.
things.
Man. What so moving forward, you guys have now gone through a journey that some parents have not gone through, and maybe some that will be listening to this have gone through.
Mhm,
What was that journey like? Your wife, you get home um, without your son, right? And
mhm.
then what was that recovery period like for her? And then also the journey that you guys went on with your son being born at 28 weeks.
Yeah, that was,
And still going on, right?
yeah,
Still.
still going on. So it's funny, I don't know how this, became a family thing, but my sister, the year before, almost to the day, had her baby girl at 24 weeks, and I'd remembered talking with her and her sharing how that the NICU journey, how hard the NICU journey is. She shared with me how would be all kinds of things that would sound really scary, but were totally normal in the NICU world. So just to like remain, you know, level headed,
Calm.
I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
remain calm about it. Like it'll be okay. And then also how her relationship with the Lord, um, it just like went to another level. Like a lot more became tangible to her during that journey. And that last part, you hear about people who experience hardships and share a similar sentiment. But I think that tangibility, I was like, how is that going to flesh out, in walking through this situation. But to be honest, like I experienced the exact same thing. The if you've grown up in the church, you definitely have uh, heard things about God being omnipotent and omnipresent, and attributes of
Yeah.
God. And one of the things that has always been, you know, like head knowledge and something to take comfort in is his omnipresence, and that he is Emmanuel as well, that he is with us always. That's always been something that I've taken comfort in, but it became real in a whole new way in this journey, because it wasn't just me and my it wasn't just me in my life. It wasn't me, maybe feeling lonely in a moment and, knowing that God is with me, but like leaving my son every day, um, just in his hospital room. We'd go up there for as long as we could, and then have to come back home. And part of that was Megan's recovery, and she wasn't able to stay a super long time. Part of that was she was still in the hospital, and so I was bouncing back and forth between the
Yeah.
NICU and the ICU where she was at. But remembering in those moments when I was leaving, that how much that I loved him and cared for him, um, that God loves him and cares for him even more. And the times when I couldn't be there, he was with him there. Um, that was just a whole new level of experiencing what, Emmanuel means, and God's omnipresence, what
Yeah.
that is. And I might tear up while I'm reading this, but I think it really hit me when Psalm 23 is one of those psalms that I think a lot of people go to, and you might find on a coffee cup or whatever. It's
Yeah.
been uh, as someone who struggles with anxiety, um, it's been a something to cling to for me, is
Yeah.
Psalm 23. And it hit me when I was reading through, like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Then just starting at that part, like um, it hit me about Theodore while he was in the NICU. The Lord is his shepherd. He shall not want. He makes him lie down in green pastures. He leads him beside still waters. He restores his soul. He leads him in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And um, reading that in his, about him, just hit me in a completely new way, that like he was with him, and he has such a little heart and little mind, and a God who was with him and could care for him, exactly how he needed to be cared for, both like caring for his little heart and his little mind and protecting him, but also through the hands of nurses and doctors. And yeah, that I think that for me was a whole new um, takeaway through
Yeah.
that
Wow.
journey.
That's super powerful, man. So, um, let's pivot to this here. This is something that's, I think, super interesting.
Yeah.
Um, your wife, your son. What is your relationship like with your wife? I mean, you almost lose her on your baby moon. That just,
Yeah.
on Thanksgiving Day, you almost lose your wife. You almost lose your son at 28 weeks. Not sure if when she went septic, how long that was going on. Probably, I'm sure there was some fear there. Like, is he going to be okay? Just so fast forwarding to today, what's it like looking at your wife now? Like, what's it like before this horrible circumstance and now? Like, do you realize like how fragile life is? Are those little arguments around the house that maybe happened before, they not as much, or
Yeah.
what's your relationship like now?
Our relationship in general is, uh, we like to give each other a hard time. That's like our love language. So that's kind of there. We still, I think, to keep from crying about it, we like joke about it or like poke fun at each other. Um, but to be honest with you, simultaneously, the fragility of life was like made apparent, and also I don't think I fully grasp it. Um, because I'm like, she survived that, but also, I mean, it was, in another hour or two, and she would not have. And so, uh, yeah, like it's a weird thing. I think honestly, just like you mentioned the thing about the little petty fights.
Yeah.
I would love to say that like, "Oh, yeah, we don't have those anymore." We've recognized that, like, life is too precious, but I think, like, very similar to the Israelites in the wilderness, like, God does something incredible, and then, like, a couple days later, they're complaining about,
It's like,
uh
honey, do you need to leave the dishes in? There is a dishwasher right here.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, should I
Yeah.
win this battle or should I go put the dishes
Yeah,
in?
I don't know, should I just drop this? But yeah, like in that same way, I think it's like, you know, would love to be like, "Oh yeah, we don't have those issues anymore because we really recognize the value, and we love each other so much," which we do.
Yeah.
We recognize the value, but like you still lose sight of that stuff. So we still have those things to work through, but I do think our relationship has there is a depth there that wasn't there before, an appreciation from one another. I think from her vantage point, which she's kind of shared with me, um, me being, I mean, for a while it was, son in the NICU, wife in the ICU.
How long was he in the NICU for?
He was in the NICU for 52 days,
Sheesh.
and probably should have been in there longer, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But we were basically running a NICU at home. We were glad to have him at home, but yeah, like I think me taking care of lots of things, whether it be around the house or being the go between Megan and Theodore while they were both in their respective places in the hospital. I think she grew an appreciation for me in that sense. From my vantage point, yeah, I've definitely grown in appreciation for just her and who she is. I guess what she brings to my life is part of it. And recognizing that there would be so many things that were just a mess without her around here, but also, yeah, just me as a person. And when I was in that hospital room when she went septic and not being able to talk with her, um, I really felt the weight of not having her to just like bounce things off of, or to tell a joke to, or
Yeah.
and so I've that's been a big takeaway is like just, yeah, she brings so much to my life and enriches my life in such an incredible way. And I've definitely grown in appreciation for
Mm.
her in that way. But like I said, we still have those petty arguments.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Still, all of that stuff still, still remains.
Yeah.
But that's marriage for you.
Oh
So
yeah. So a question I got is, tell us, the audience as well, about the NICU journey, and maybe
yeah,
some people listening to this, if they've gone through that or are going through that, right now. What was that like for you?
Anyway, yeah, the NICU journey is a roller coaster. One minute you'll get the best news ever, and you're basically on a high, and then it feels like within a couple of hours that can change, and you're evaluating for possible surgery or um, and our journey was relatively stable. I can't even imagine for someone whose journey is more concerned about life and death before, throughout the whole journey.
Yeah.
Because we had those two. That's something I wasn't prepared for. Was This is a hard thing to talk about, but something I wasn't prepared for was new babies being delivered. You're in the NICU long enough that you learn that a new baby just came in, uh, and then a couple days later, that baby's not there anymore, um, and you've seen that baby. You can, most NICUs are kind of open, and so you can tell if someone's vitals aren't doing very well. And yeah, we had a couple instances like that during our journey where you're you overhear phone calls. We had one where we overheard a doctor's phone call home to a family whose baby wasn't going to make it, and your baby's in the NICU at the same time, and so you're feeling sorrow for that family and praying for that family and that baby and the doctor too, who has to make that call, and then also worried about, like, could that be my kid? Are
Yeah.
we going to get a call like that? um and so the NICU it's filled with wonderful, wonderful people. And we had so many great people who were caring for Theodore and were with him and praying for him, and all of those things. It's also a heartbreaking place, but the journey does come to an end. I would recommend trying to find some sort of routine to keep your sanity. But yeah, that's kind of the NICU journey.
Yeah. What broke your heart the most? Like looking at your little son, what got to you the most?
What got to me the most? uh, Are you saying about him?
Yeah. Just
Yeah,
like looking down at him, like what got to you, like with the helplessness, like obviously he's in the best place, best for his care, but what got to you the most?
the helplessness. Like you said, honestly, that was he's just laying there, and he's hooked up to all this medical equipment and uh, struggling to breathe, and struggling to do basic functions. And he's completely powerless. Me watching him, like, I was completely powerless. Yeah, just feeling completely helpless. And I think that's that piece where we had to remind ourselves that um, God was caring for him during those moments, and the doctors and nurses were caring for him during those moments, that we couldn't, and that he couldn't do anything about it. We had to remind ourselves of those things, because yeah, it was. You feel completely powerless. You're watching this kid that you love suffer, and you can't do anything about it. And that was very that was very challenging.
Yeah, man. Gosh, and I think of so many people that are at home that get those phone calls, and I'm sure you're like, gosh, what
Yeah,
is it about us that, I'm sure there's even some guilt there too, like some
yeah,
sorrow for the other family, but gosh, you know, that could happen to you guys, could happen to
hmm
anyone. What
yeah.
a lonely journey. And how's Theodore today? How's he doing now?
Good question. He is doing great as of right now. So he was born in November. His due date was in February, and uh, he now is taking all of his feeds really well. He has been on oxygen up to this point, but we've started the process of getting him off of oxygen, and he's been doing great off of oxygen. So he's breathing on his own, eating on his own. He's full of life and personality, and yeah, he has more like awake time now, so we get to play with him a little bit more. But yeah, he's doing awesome now, and yeah, we are super grateful. Like you said, it is, you do have a little bit of that guilt where it's like, man, that could have been us. Why wasn't that us? This is kind of circling back to one of your earlier questions, but when they're expecting the delivery of a preemie, they start the mom on like these different courses of drugs to help the baby develop as like the lungs and the brain as fast as possible. And Megan's body was under tremendous stress, obviously. I mean, she almost died. So
Yeah.
her body was under incredible stress, but like she never actually went into labor. And so because of that, they were able to administer all of those drugs that Theodore needed to
Wow.
be able to mature quickly. Um, and on one hand, I feel extremely grateful, and I do feel like that was, the Lord was caring for us in that, and caring for Theodore in that, and was looking out for us. And also that sense of guilt where sometimes moms just go into labor and it happens quick and they're not able to administer all of those drugs. And so the NICU might be a little bit of a harder journey. And yeah, but for us, we were extremely grateful that he was able to get all of those medications. And I think that has played a part in him being where he's at today, where he's able to breathe, on his own. And he's developed really well. His hearing and eyesight and just all of those things that they worry about with preemies. He's checking all the boxes. So
That's awesome.
yeah, we're just grateful to have him home.
Man, that's so good. Well, what a miracle he is, and it's going to be remarkable to see what he does in life. I'm sure you and Megan have
Yeah.
talked about that a lot. What is he going to
Mm-hmm.
do?
Mm-hmm.
The Lord has got his hand on him clearly. And so what an incredible, incredible story. Thank you for sharing that, man. And also thanks for sharing about your relationship too with your wife and how that was before and after all this happened. And so thankful that Megan's okay, that Theodore's okay, and that you guys are back
Yeah.
home as a family unit. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining the show. We really appreciate you coming by and taking the time to share your story. So, yeah, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and make sure to follow No Longer Nomads. And you can go to our social or our website at nolongernomads.co. All right, thanks so much for joining us.